To you first, Bill. The City of Houston is taking suggestions for what should go into its climate action plan in the development. What do you think should go into it? What have you seen other cities do?
Well, I mean, far be it from me to give too much advice to others. And especially since, as the mayor has pointed out, I come from the state of Vermont, where our biggest city, Burlington, has a population of 50,000 people. So it is understood that the great megalopolises of the planet face particular challenges and things that are hard. The only real suggestion, and it doesn't come from me, it comes from physics, is we've got to do this fast. We've got to move at a pace that we haven't moved before. And so figuring out, I mean, there's a sense in which answers that come too late aren't really answers in this case. And so I guess what I'm saying is any plan that's going to work is probably going to be a plan that front loads as much as possible of the action, gets things done as quickly as it's possible to do it. And it's been fun to watch now some cities around the country and around the world commit to making really huge changes by 2030, setting themselves the kind of deadlines that frankly, you know, we'll be around to see whether we meet or not. And not just the young people in the room, even some of the old people like me in the room. So I guess that would be, I think as we look around the kind of suite of plans that people are figuring out now around the world, when we look at things like the Green New Deal that's being put forward on a national level, it's that emphasis on speed that's so important.
Mayor, do you have a response?
Yeah, I think it has to be comprehensive. It has to talk, address transportation. Of course, it has to address buildings. In this case, we are doing that already with respect to our municipal buildings. It has to address the infrastructure. For the city of Houston, for example, as we rebuild the city of Houston from Hurricane Harvey, this is a good time to incorporate new ideas and thoughts into how we rebuild the city, make it stronger, more resilient, more sustainable. And so we've already put forth a plan as it relates to the green infrastructure, because even as we talk about climate change, when we talk about the resiliency of the city of Houston, they all are connected. We have to make sure that we are aligned. So it doesn't make any sense, for example, as we rebuild the city, that we don't incorporate, for example, the green infrastructure within that, because they meet multiple objectives. That's important. So just like on transportation, you know, people are going to be voting, for example, on Metro Next in November. It was important to talk about ways of getting people out of their cars and trucks and utilizing the public transit system more so. That's important. When I came into office, we talked about a transportation paradigm shift, because historically in the city of Houston, we focused on building roadway capacity, 610, Beltway, Grand Parkway, all of that, but the congestion has come. So now we need a paradigm shift, and we have to design and construct a city that's a lot more pedestrian, walkable friendly, more multimodal options, make a transit system that's much more attractive, utilizing technology a lot more. So that's important. The street lights in the city of Houston, for example, we've already started retrofitting them, and so and going to LED lighting, and that's reducing the greenhouse gas emissions by 5%. Our buildings, municipal buildings, we have a lot of them in this city. How we construct new buildings or even retrofit the old, that's critically important. So there are a number of different facets that need to be included in our plan. EVs, for example, electric vehicles. A lot of our fleet was damaged from Hurricane Harvey. As we purchase new, we've got to think about electric vehicles, charge stations, and all of that. So we've gotten comments from over 700 people. 700 people have been involved in this climate action plan. It is important that we be bold as we move forward, because I agree with Bill, time is of the essence. And we're bringing people along to the table. But it will have to be something for Houston, something that's unique to Houston. Okay, that's important. So I'm excited about what the future brings.
Mayor, I have a question for you. City regulates very little on things like transportation and buildings, where most of our emissions come from. So where will the city find leverage to implement real change? And what can you do with pure leadership?
Well, we have a lot to say, though, on terms of transportation, transit, and mobility. That's critically important, just like in the Metro Next plan. I mean, it does provide more light rail. It does provide more what I call bus rapid transit, rubber on rail, 75 miles of that. We do provide more sidewalks. It's important for the city of Houston to provide more high comfort bike lanes in the city of Houston. It's just important, for example, that as we build forward, that we redesign a city that's more walkable, pedestrian friendly. So those things we can do, and we need to move forward in doing that. We are providing incentives, for example, to builders of buildings, providing incentives for them to build or retrofit, taking into account conservation and how to save on energy, the PACE program. So that's moving forward. Just like with the infrastructure, the green infrastructure initiatives that we're putting in place. And even as we talk about even building, I don't like where the focus is on building highways, because there's a lot of conversation on one in particular. But the key is, can we build even a freeway as we move forward, where the focus is not on the freeway, but on providing more parks and green space, the caps. Can we do it in such a way that in many ways the freeway kind of disappears and you focus on achieving a lot of the other goals? And it has to be incorporated within our overall mass transit program. So there's a way to go forward, and I think we can be instrumental. We can be instrumental in that. And quite frankly, a part of being mayor of the city of Houston is to convince people that these storms are coming with greater frequency and greater intensity. And whether you're an energy company or you're just a homeowner, it behooves all of us to work together, because if we don't, we all lose. And we have to find ways to make it a win-win and something that's uniquely Houston. So it's one of those moments. It's a good time. But I do think we have to get it right, and we have to move as quickly as we can in order to have meaningful results as quickly as possible.
Bill, do you have a response?
No, I sort of got one just pure, easy leadership question here, way to do it. Because some of these things you're all going to have to work out for yourselves, and it's all detailed and hard, but some things are easy and important. As you know, next Friday is going to be the biggest day of climate action ever on this planet. These school climate strikes that Greta Thunberg in Sweden started have spread around the world. And now it's for everybody of all ages. And I know there's people here tonight from 350 Action and from the Sunrise Movement, things we're organizing like crazy to turn out lots of people at noon at City Hall. It's noon at City Hall. Last week, your colleague, the mayor of New York, said that any public school child in New York that wanted to leave school for the day and go to the climate strike, that was good with him. Now, I'm not sure he actually had quite the legal authority, to do it, but I think he had the moral authority to do it. So I was kind of hoping just that you might say the same thing to the kids of Houston, that if they could take that teachable moment to get out there and really join in, that would be a good thing. And maybe you'll get to be there on the steps of the City Hall too, Friday.
Bill, you're very provocative. One thing I would say, no, I certainly want to invite people to come to City Hall. City Hall is always an excellent forum to come and to articulate one's thoughts. I certainly will be there. I look forward to being there. So there's no question about that. These are urgent moments. But something else that I will add, though, it's just like in the Sunnyside area, to give you an idea when we're talking about renewables, there are 300 contaminated acres. 300 contaminated acres. What we did do, working with Laura Cunningham and Tina Pires at the City of Houston, and working with C40, and the redesign initiative, is that we put out an RFP to see how we could take those 300 acres and reinvent that space. And the goal is to take those 300 acres and turn those 300 acres into a major urban solar farm. And we have selected a group to do just that. We're working out the details, but it's a one way of providing more renewables, in this case solar power, and also using it to transform a community that's been held down because you have 300 contaminated space, and to do it in such a way that we achieve multiple advantages and multiple benefits. So I'm just using that as we have to think out of the box. We do have to be bold. We do have to recognize that renewables is a way of providing more, not just a cleaner energy source, but providing an economic stimulus to an area at the same time. And we're doing that in the city of Houston.
Mayor, the scientists tell us we must start bending the emission curve by 2020 if we're going to meet the minimal goals of the Paris Climate Accord. What are your ideas for quick wins? How will the city track results?
And that's a more difficult question. I do think a quick win would be, and again, supporting the Metro Next proposal in November 5th, this year, it would be a plus, because that's a step in the right direction. We have to do everything we can to get people, out of their cars and out of their trucks. And we have to utilize transit more. There's no question about that. And then at the same time, for people who are going to remain in their cars, this coming the 19th, when is the 19th? The 19th is on
Friday, I think.
Whenever that is, we're having a press conference as it relates to Evolve Houston, and that's dealing with electric vehicles, a major initiative there. And we have companies like NRG and Shell that's joining with us in that regard. So we're moving forward on that front. The green infrastructure as it relates to rebuilding the city of Houston, we're moving that, and that's in place. Changing out your street lights, retrofitting your buildings, we're already moving in that regard. The city of Houston, 80% wind, 12% solar, and I've already instructed my staff, the goal is to get to 100%. So we're moving forward on that initiative. Look, this is the energy capital of the world. Prior to Hurricane Harvey, let me just say, very seldom would you have found a mayor in the city of Houston openly talking about climate change. Now, we may have gone to a conference in Vermont or New York and talked about it, but not necessarily here in the city of Houston. Now we are openly discussing it, openly talking about it. And I will tell you, for the city of Houston, that's significant. That is significant. And so, we recognize that time is of the essence. These storms keep coming. And quite frankly, it's not just about a hurricane anymore. It's about a system that can quickly drop 6 inches of rain in 10 hours and create a lot of flooding. So it's imperative that we move forward. How we measure that, we still have to fine tune. How we fine tune that. And Bill, if you've got some suggestions, I'm all ears.
I'd say only that as you measure it, that your greatest assistance that will come from, as you know, from the sort of civil society monitoring your progress. And there's great environmentalists in this town who will, as you know, sometimes politicians don't want to hear critics and things, and it makes, but I sense very much that you're in the other camp that understands that the greatest asset you have are the people who work hard to keep the fire to one's feet, to keep things moving forward fast. So those are probably, any more than particular numerical metrics, those are the, as you know, the kind of way to keep things on track and speeding up all the time. So I'm really glad that you know those people in this city and will take seriously their efforts going forward.
Mayor, Houston, as you say, is the fossil fuel capital of the world. We all have friends in this industry. But science asserts civilization must transition out of carbon energy as quickly as possible. What's your approach for interacting effectively with Houston's fossil fuel community?
It's bringing everyone to the table. I would tell you, Harvey was just a wake-up call for a lot of people. There were people that were already moving forward on climate change. Mm-hmm. There were others who were reluctant and didn't necessarily want to discuss it. But Harvey said we were going to discuss it, okay? And we are now discussing it. I mean, I do want to applaud the city of Houston in the sense that when we joined the Rockefeller 100 Resilient Cities, it's Shell that's underwriting that initiative, okay? When it comes to the Climate Action Plan, it's Centerpoint that's underwriting that initiative. When it comes to taking those 300 acres in Sunnyside, low-income community, you've got companies that are involved in that initiative for renewables, solar farm. And if we're successful, the largest urban solar farm in the United States. That would be significant. And so it's recognizing that we all have to participate, or we all lose. This is not where Hurricane Harvey comes and says, okay, I'm going to drop a lot of rain on just homeowners and I'm going to leave the industry alone. You know, it didn't discriminate. So either we all work collaboratively and in tandem with one another, or we all lose. And I think from my vantage point, is saying to, and let me just back up. When I was in the legislature and I was on the committee that oversaw the energy sector in the state of Texas, utilities, mm-hmm. You know, we used to get most of our power from coal. Right. Okay. Then we made the shift to natural gas and other areas. But we saw the shift that's taken place. In this city, we used to talk about just fossil fuels. Now we're talking about being the energy capital and the diversification that's taking place within that energy sector. And if we want to continue to wear the crown of being the energy capital of the world, it means we have to diversify. And just like at Several Week in March, right here in the city of Houston, companies came from all over the world. We were speaking a lot about innovation, technology, renewables. Same thing with OTC, okay? So things are changing. Things are changing. NRG coming to the table with electric vehicles, okay? And Shell. So things are changing. And I think people recognize, look, well, people may not be excited necessarily by talking about climate change. They are excited talking about their bottom line. Right. And what works for their bottom line. And in this case, there are more jobs being produced from renewables than even from fossil fuels. And so for me, as the mayor of the city of Houston and where we are, you know, I look for win-wins and try to do my very best to work to bring everybody to the table and to move forward. I do want to continue to be known, I want the city to be known as the energy capital of the world. But within that, there is a lot of room for space. If we don't move in this regard, we will not hold on to the crown of being energy capital of the world. And so it just behooves all of us in our city, industry, and others to come along and help create this climate action plan, and to do it in such a way that Houston will continue this reputation of leading and not necessarily following. And if we can make it happen right here in the city of Houston, the energy capital of the world, then it can happen anywhere, is what I would argue.
One last question for Bill, and Mayor, I'm going to give you the last word. Bill, if you were the mayor's close advisor, what would be your guidance to maximize his success?
Let me turn around so I can look at
the mayor needs no advice. The mayor survived a quarter century in the state legislature. He knows more about politics. He's forgotten more about politics than I'll ever know. So no advice from me except to say, on this question in particular, climate change, I think I'd make a special effort to listen hard to young people. They have more at stake than anybody else. You and I are going to be dead before this is at its absolute zenith. And so there's enormous moral weight and practical weight to sort of keeping close the people who are going to have to deal with this. Even though, I mean, I've spent my life working with young people, and it's uncomfortable sometimes because they're less forgiving of political reality and more insistent on reality, you know, as a kind of bottom line. And that's why I hope that Friday, when you're out on the steps of City Hall, there'll be lots and lots of young people there. But the last one of these school strikes, I wrote a little op-ed in the Los Angeles Times with a 12-year-old from Colorado, and it was in the form of a absence note to send back to your teacher explaining why you weren't there because you had to be out saving the world. So even if you can't grant them all the right to go, maybe at least you can put in a good word with their principals when they're headed back to school at the end of the day, after having learned what they can learn and after having taught what they have to teach all of us. Best of luck with all of this, Mr. Mayor, and thank you very much for your good work.
And thank you, Bill. And what I would say in closing, Randy, and to Bill and to all of you, is that when I became mayor, my daughter told me, she said, Dad, don't build a city for yesterday, build a city for tomorrow. That was the advice that she gave me. Remember us and those who have yet to come. And that was sage advice, and I appreciate that. It is important for us to be transformational. I think people are tired with incrementalism because you can do a little bit here and a little bit there, and at the end of the day, no one sees the little you've done. I do believe what people are seeking now is transformation, and we recognize the seriousness of this issue, and we can't run away from it. And it is especially hard on people who are already living on the margins of life. Because, for example, when these storms come, and if you're already living on the margins of life, you're pushed down even more. Okay? So, and I'm very mindful of that. And coming out of a community that where I was born and reared and still live, people can't afford to keep going through these sort of storms and then waiting on the recovery to years or more after the fact. So we have to be transformational in our approach. And quite frankly, from time to time, even people like myself, we have to be pushed. And though I don't want to throw this in, well, I am going to throw it in. It's just like when the students came to City Hall saying they had enough of gun violence. And I was at City Hall on the 3rd floor, and I asked my people, where's that noise? What is that? And they said those are the high school students that are out there in City Hall. And so I said, let me go down and talk to them. And I did, and I listened to them. And their plea was genuine and authentic. And in part, that is what led to the mayor's commission to end gun violence. And I ended up placing several of them on the task force, and basically said, I don't just want you to be a voice at the steps. Now be a voice on the task force and represent your point of view. And let's move this thing forward. So I agree with you. I agree with you that we have to include all of our voices. But I'm optimistic. I'm optimistic. Anytime you can take 407 mayors from across the country, and the decision that we have made is that on these type of issues, the leadership may not come from the top, coming down. The leadership has to come from the bottom, going up. And quite frankly, cities across the country are now leading the way. So I'm hopeful that we can make some significant, substantial progress on this issue. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, very much.
Thank you, Bill.